Nigerian electricity supply industry tackles incidents of energy theft, investigates alleged connivance by some electricity customers and meter manufacturers.
Cleric urges Federal Road Safety Corps to take more action at addressing speeding to save more lives on Nigerian roads.
Troops apprehend suspected Boko Haram terrorist in Yobe State.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, our focus is on the controversy over the proposed amendment of the Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas (NLNG) Act by the National Assembly. Plus, 39-year-old Emmanuel Macron takes over as the new president of France.
All right, Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas (NLNG) Limited was established in 1989 and is the most significant arrowhead of the federal government's quest to eliminate gas flaring and, of course, derive value from the country's 187 trillion cubic feet of proven gas reserves.
According to industry records, the NLNG is the most successful venture of the federal government, as it has converted some 119 billion standard cubic meters of associated gas into exports, such as LNG, which is liquefied natural gas, natural gas liquids, thus helping to reduce gas flaring by oil companies from over 60% now to just less than 25%.
All right, at least that's what this statistics tell us.
That's according to industry sources.
Exactly. Yes. Now, the most significant success of the LNG, however, is in its enormous potentials of generating revenue to government. For instance, the NLNG in the last 30 years has generated over 90 billion US dollars in revenue, delivered over $30 billion in dividends, while contributing about 4% of Nigeria's gross domestic product GDP.
All right, unfortunately, Claire, that the buoyancy of the LNG, that's the Nigerian Liquefied Natural Gas, is perhaps the source of its current controversy. And it all started in February this year when the chairman of the Senate Committee on Niger Delta, Senator Peter Nwaboshi, alleged that the NLNG had refused to pay the amount due to the Niger Delta Development Commission, that is NDDC, over the past 16 years. Now, he also insisted that the action of the company amounted to disobedience of extant laws.
And now, barely 1 month after, the House of Representatives said it had declared support for the enforcement of the NLNG Fiscal Incentives Guaranteed and Assurances Act, Cap 87, laws of the Federation of Nigeria, 2004. Now, it recommends the remittance of 3% annual revenue into the NDDC fund.
Now, 2 weeks ago, the House of Representatives made good this promise and passed the amendment to the NLNG Act. In the new provision under the amendment, the Act, of course, has been amended by adding what is now Section 7B to the principal legislation. Now, the new legislation provides that notwithstanding anything, notwithstanding Section 7 or any other provision of this Act, the Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas Limited shall pay 3% of its total annual budget to the NDDC fund, as required by Section 14, subsections 1 and 2B of the NDDC Act, of course, year 2000.
Of course, we must add, Kingsley, that the amendment, it's only done by the House of Representatives. But it is against the advice and warning by stakeholders in the oil and gas industry, of course, including the Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, that the amendment is hurtful to investment in the industry. Now, they also argue that amending the act, steering up the company, would undermine Nigeria's efforts at attracting foreign direct investment into critical areas of the country's economy.
Now, the bone of contention is the part of the LNG Fiscal Incentives, Guarantees and Assurances Act. Now, that section pertains to the assurances and guarantees which the government, now through the law, committed to investors that it will honor the act and not change it without recourse to an agreement by all stakeholders.
Now, Section 9.2 of the Act, for instance, states, among other things, that while the venture, that is NLNG, shall be subject to fiscal regime, such fiscal regime, it, in quote, and I quote, shall not be amended in any way except with the written prior agreement of the government, the company, and each of the company's stakeholders, unquote.
That's what is referred to usually as a stabilization clause. Now, for the proposed act, that's to say the amendment now to become law, it still requires the concurrence of the Senate, together, of course, obviously, with the assent of Mr. President, or let's say with 40 assents and the National Assembly then overrides it. But the question to ask is, why does the National Assembly appear to be in a hurry to amend the act without the concurrence of other shareholders? What is the implication of the proposed amendment, and what is the way out of the seeming controversy? These are other questions our guests, of course, will seek to provide answers to later on in the program, which is Good Morning Nigeria. I am Kingsley Osadolo.
Kingsley, another question to ask is, why is NLNG not willing, of course, to pay the levy to the NDDC? And I'm Claire Delabu Abdurazak. Some of the questions I would also be finding answers to on today's edition of the program. It's reaching you live from the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA. That's Africa's largest television network.
Now, in the course of the program, we shall, of course, bring you our regular companion segments. These include newspaper review, business, sports, and others. In the meantime, we are kicking off with the news, and Anne Jibuno is our guide. Hi, Anne. Morning. Good to see you.
Good to see
Hope
you.
you had a nice weekend.
Yes, yes.
And happy Mother's Day.
Same to you. Good morning. Well, good morning. Here is the day's news. Efforts to curb the incident of energy theft in the Nigerian electricity supply industry are being intensified with the ongoing investigation of the connivance by some customers and meter manufacturers to bypass meters under some of the areas covered by the Badon Electricity Distribution Company. This, among other highlights, were captured in the communique issued at the 15th monthly meeting of the power sector operatives, presided over by the Minister, Power, Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, at the NIPP Injection Substation, Jos. A statement by the Special Advisor on Media to the Minister, Hakeem Bello, indicates that the connivance has been reported to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, and is under investigation. The statement adds that the lack of corporate governance displayed by some discos, evidenced by failure to provide audited accounts, improved services, and urgent response to customer complaints, had shown inconsistencies in disco statements. Meanwhile, the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Power and Managing Director of the Rural Electrification Agency has reiterated the commitment of the federal government to paying verifiable power debts and announced the completion of fiscal verification of the top 100 MDA locations in Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, with plans to visit Eko and Ikeja discos for fiscal verification as a prelude to payment. Troops of Forward Operation Base, FICA, on routine patrol have arrested a suspected fleeing Boko Haram terrorist named Bala Ibrahim, aged 30 years, at FICA. Director Army Public Relations Brigadier General Sani Kukasheka Usman, in a statement, said preliminary investigation shows the suspect is an indigene of Bulabulin Village, FICA local government area, Yobe State. Similarly, troops deployed at Forward Operation Base, Yuga, on blocking position following a tip-off from well-meaning individuals, ambushed and arrested 4 suspected kidnappers at Mundu Village. The suspects, Yahaya Auta, aged 25, Salisu Lawal, aged 20 years, Umar Mohammed, aged 18 years, and Samaila Abubakar, were found to be in possession of one locally made 6-loader single-barrel gun, 1 empty cartridge, 2 machetes, other dangerous weapons, and the sum of 360 naira while on their way to commit a crime. Acting President Yemi Osinbajo was in Katsina in the week to declare the 4th Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Clinic open. While addressing the people, the acting president disclosed that his relationship with the president in the last 2 years has been more like a brother and a son.
I want to say that one of the reasons why I feel very much at home here in Katsina State is because this is the state of our president, President Muhammadu Buhari, who has taken me more like a brother, in fact, sometimes more like a son than a vice president. You know, the amount of trust that he has reposed in me and the amount of responsibility that he gives me on a regular basis is demonstration of the fact that he believes strongly that in this country we can truly be brothers so long as we want to work for the good of our people. And I really thank him all the time very much for this, for the confidence that he continues to represent.
The Federal Road Safety Corps has been urged to take more actions to address speeding to save more lives on Nigerian roads. This was re-echoed at a church service to mark the 4th United Nations Global Road Safety Week in Abuja. Clerics also appealed to road users to adhere to traffic regulations.
There is order in creation, reflecting the order in God. So we should obey traffic rules.
People should use the road as if there is tomorrow.
We have a lot of pressure on the roads. Therefore, FRSC really insisted on ensuring that we have to cut down the excesses of commercial vehicles by implementing the speed meting device.
Well, as France swears in its new president, 39-year-old Emmanuel Macron, unification of the people of France and adequate security in the country are major challenges before him. Former Nigerian ambassador to France and Monaco, Ambassador Akin Fayomi, said this in an exclusive interview with our foreign desk reporter, Oyeyemi Ajayi.
Thank you. I think he has a lot on his plate right now. France is not in very good shape economically. So there is an unemployment of about 11%. He has to take care of that immediately, particularly among the youth, even though he's a young man himself. So that means he can identify with the problems and the youth there. Labor problem, they're also there. A lot of strike going on in France. He has immigration matters to cope with. And most importantly, he has terrorism to cope with. That is the issue of security. You can see that in the last few months or years, France has been bedeviled by a lot of terrorist incidents. In Paris, in Nice, in Cannes, we've seen a lot of security problems. That is a key issue for him. And that is why I think the French people voted for him, because it's like stability in the system. It's more or less going to toe the line of President Hollande in that aspect. That means fighting terrorism together with the rest of Europe and the rest of the world.
The importance attached to human capacity development by the Nigerian Armed Forces for its operations has been commended. Minister of Defense Mansour Dan Ali, who was represented by the Chief of Defense Staff General Abayomi Olonishakin, gave the commendation at the maiden graduation ceremony of the Air War College, Makurdi, Benue State.
Particularly proud that in less than 2 years, we have been able to revitalize our armed forces for the full restoration of Nigerian territorial integrity that was once violated by Boko Haram insurgents.
The NTA Television College has graduated 102 internally displaced persons trained in digital camera operations and techniques. The Director General of the NTA and the Federal Commissioner for Refugees, Migrants and Internally Displaced Persons charged the participants to utilize the skills to improve their economic status.
It is a joy and satisfaction that within this short period, these young men and women have become experts in camera operations and editing.
The youths that were affected by these debilitating effects of this insurgency were helped to develop and improve their human capacity through entrepreneurial development, skill, and talent attraction programs.
But that's the news for now. Claire and Kingsley will be back after this break.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
What happened? It was a mosquito. Oh, Daddy, here.
What's happening here?
Mama, mosquitoes.
I sprayed, but the mosquitoes aren't dying. No longer, because I bought Motain Power Guard, which kills 100% mosquitoes. Motain Power Guard kills 100% mosquitoes.
So what's up, sweetheart? You really look like you're up to something.
I have a secret.
Okay.
I'll be going to Europe next week.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Like you have your visa, your passport, your plane ticket?
No, not that way. Some men are helping us. We pay them, they take us through the desert, and then we cross the sea into Europe.
The desert, the sea. Isn't that the route where many have died?
Yes, it is indeed a very dangerous journey. In 2016 alone, 4,900 people died while crossing the Mediterranean Sea to enter Europe. Many were Nigerians. For the very few who survived the journey, they are forced into prostitution or other crimes just to survive. Eventually, they will be arrested and deported to Nigeria. Don't be a victim. Don't go this way.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Thank you for joining us. If you've just tuned in, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria right here on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Time now to take a look at trending business news. An economic analyst predicting Nigeria's inflation will maintain downward streak. Plus, U.S. laptop ban to be extended to European flights. We have details of this and more with Joy Uzo.
Welcome to Business News. With the expected Tuesday's release of figures for April Consumer Price Index, CPI, by the National Bureau of Statistics, economic analysts and market watchers have made the projections for the index, which gauges inflation. Essentially, they expect to see a continuation of the downward trajectory in the index, which began in February when it plunged to 17.78% year-on-year from 18.72% in January, and subsequently dropped to 17.26% in March. NBS had attributed the decline for the 2 consecutive months to the effects of stabilizing prices in already high food and non-food prices, as well as favorable base effects over 2016 prices. Meanwhile, reacting to the recently passed 2017 budget by the National Assembly, economic analyst and social development expert Chibuzo Okereke is of the view that effective implementation of the budget will further improve Nigeria's economy and eventually see her out of recession.
So many organizations have already said we are on our way to recovery. But one thing, budget presentation, budget passage is not the issue, but the commitment of the operators of the budget to truly implement it as it's supposed to be. So if we implement so many of the provisions I have seen, I think that is going to lead us to somewhere that will, exit the recession and move to, recovery. However, Nigerians must know, and even the government, that budget is about the people. If it does not impart on the market woman, on the man on the street, we have not started.
And in the aviation sector, Amid shifting global economic forces, political change, and security issues, Emirates, the Dubai-based airline, is feeling the squeeze. As an annual report from the Emirates Group reveals, profits for the airline dropped by about 70% over the last fiscal year, a change the airline attributes to forces beyond its control. These include a number of Trump administration policies placing restrictions on travel from the Middle East. Meanwhile, the U.S. laptop ban prohibiting travelers from certain Middle East countries from bringing laptops and other electronic devices on flights to the U.S. as carry-on luggage is likely to be extended to include some countries in Europe. This is according to media reports citing government officials. Investigation revealed that 6 U.S. and European officials have said they expect the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to make an announcement on expanding the ban soon. The specifics of when this will be remain unclear. Government officials have been meeting with U.S. airlines on a nearly weekly basis to discuss the issue, and a decision could come in the next few weeks. Now to the Nigerian Stock Exchange. A total turnover of 3.255 billion shares, worth 28.738 billion naira in 25,370 deals were traded last week by investors on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. The NSE All-Share Index and market capitalization appreciated by 7.46% to close the week at 28,192.46 and 9.746 trillion naira. Similarly, all other indices finished higher during the week, with the exception of the NSE Ascent Index that closed flat. Now, a look at the closing figures on the floor of the exchange for Friday, 12th of May. That's it on Business News. Thanks for watching.
All right, thank you very much there, Joy Uzo, for the business package. Next for us, we're taking a look at the headlines in some of today's newspapers.
Right, it is my pleasure to welcome right here in the studio Omini Oden. He is a newspaper reviewer. Omini, glad to have you once again with us.
Thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure to be back after a while. You guys look quite radiant for the weekend.
Yeah, it's a nice weekend. I hope you enjoyed yours as well.
I did.
All right, we have a number of stories on the front pages of the papers, stories on the economy, stories on security, of course, politics, and others. Let's begin by taking a look at the front page of the New Telegraph. New Telegraph, just let's above the nameplate. Let's go from top to bottom. Banks under probe over IOC's 62.9 billion capital flight. IOC stands for International Oil Companies. And below that, FAC, that's the Federation Accounts Allocation Committee, malls sharing $53.5 million in reserved account. Details of that story can be found on page 7. Below the nameplate, you have a window of other headlines. Ill health, Buhari is alive, says presidency. And that story is in greater detail on page 7. Court orders Uba, that's Senator Andy Uba, to refund 50 million naira to Oranto Petroleum. And herdsmen killed 23 in Niger and Delta. Details of the story can be found on page 34. Sexual assault, that's the kicker. We won't back out of schoolboys' prosecution. That's attributed to the Lagos State government. And details of that story on page 35. Lead story, of course, is with a double-decker headline, how senators and reps will spend 125 billion naira in 2017. That story is in greater detail on page 2. But of course, you have a sidebar on the front page there indicating highlights of the National Assembly budget. Purchase of official vehicles, fueling of cars, travels and transportation, and printing of non-security documents, plus other issues, insurance of vehicles, souvenirs, computerized identity cards. All of the details, of course, you can find on the front page in the sidebar of the lead story. This lead story, as I said, is in greater detail on page 2. Now, beside that sidebar, there's a story there. That's a human interest story. It says, woman sells grandson for $250,000 naira. That's 250,000. Details of the story on page 34. Now, the second lead story, which is right at the foot of the front page of the New Telegraph, says, Boko Haram abducted and drugged me. That's according to a teenager with a rider sent on suicide mission for refusing marriage proposals. That story is in greater detail on page 6. Now, lastly, there's a health story there. Breast milk could cure cancer. Wow.
All right, Kingsley, that New Telegraph is quite loaded with stories, of course, with the highlights of how the Assembly will spend its own budget. But, you know, when the news of the Ebola broke over the weekend, someone said, not again. It's a lead story on the front page of the leadership. In spite of government assurances, Ebola checks yet to begin at airports. The details of that you can find on page 5. In spite of government assurances, Ebola checks yet to begin at airports. Now, topping that story, Sanusi II, Kanu government hands off as Assembly insists on probing the emir. Kanu government hands off as Assembly insists on probing the emir. Of course, if you're interested in this story, you can find the details of it on page 5. And again, just to take you a little above that story, AMCON has injected 1.5 billion naira into Arik Air, and that's coming from Captain Ilobudu. And that's coming down again to the, of course, the lead story, just a bit of the other side of the picture story. Nigeria may lose $106 million daily to crude export facility closure. Nigeria may lose $106 million daily to crude export facility closure. And that's the outlook of the leadership. Let's go over to Omini Bosudin.
Well, the trending stories border on health, security, fraud, but let's take the one that talks about Ebola. But I'm amazed that most of the papers tucked the Ebola story away, given the strides recorded by the federal government, and that was the first time Nigerians really saw a clear-cut synergy between the federal, state, and local government over the fight of Ebola. We expected that papers would have given a very big headlines this morning.
But Ebola is not in Nigeria yet.
I agree, but given the fact that it's something that is we need to be very apprehensive about. Already, the Center for Disease Control in Nigeria, over the weekend, they said one case was recorded, but one of the papers talked about, as at this morning, said 11 cases in Congo. And because of that, the Center for Disease Control says government has stepped up surveillance at ports and airports. Right. Specifically, they said that the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, and the Murtala Mohammed Airport in Lagos, and other airports, Aminu Kano and Port Harcourt, are very clear area where they have taken steps. But the worry is that some of the people are saying that what they are saying has not started happening. I can imagine what's going to happen in a government Pakistan, because after the Ebola defeat, most of the sanitizers and what all went comatose. I don't know, maybe Kingsley, maybe in a couple of minutes we'll get them back on track, because seriously, if serious steps are not taken about this, what we think is in Central Africa may creep into Nigeria.
But this paper, this paper, leadership, if you take the details on page 5, it says that the federal government will hold an emergency meeting today.
Yes.
Today, of course, to properly discuss and give, appropriate directives.
Yeah, but I think that it's clear that the Center for Disease Control did say, if you recall, Professor Nasidi was then in charge, that the protocols that were established for containing and dealing with Ebola in Nigeria in 2014, that those protocols are still in place. So all that is required, I'm sure the meetings that they're going to hold today will obviously kick that into effect straight away, I believe so.
Then the other story where I say let us start with held is that the special assistant, senior special assistant to the President of Media Publicity, Garba Shehu, has described as plain lies and spread by vested interest to create panic, that no cause for apprehension by Nigerians, as nothing unpleasant has happened to Mr. President. That the social media story that trended is not true. Mr. President is in London and nothing unpleasant has happened to him. Quickly, the revelation by a 14-year-old girl that was sent on a suicide mission should be taken seriously by security agencies, because given the fact that the revelation she gave that she turned down offers for marriage has made her to send her on a suicide mission. But by divine intervention, that did not happen. But the stories also have it that the 82 Chibok girls freed who are undergoing profiling by the federal government are likely to be joined by their parents by Friday this week. Although the Minister of Women Affairs could not be reached to give what the mood it would take for the parents to be reached. Quickly, but within that, the United Nations Population Fund is suffering a setback which might affect intervention on psychological checks and health care by the agency on victims who have been released from an insurgency camp. So that is a worry, but there is hope that some moves have been made to restore the funding.
All right, Omine, thanks a lot. Let's take a quick look now at the Independent newspaper. Independent, on its front page, above the nameplate, we'll begin with that. Anene's son slumps and dies at Lagos Lawn Tennis Club. That's Chief Tony Anene. His son slumps and passed away over the weekend at the Lagos Lawn Tennis Club. Now, the lead story for the paper says, federal government targets recovered loot and oil income to fund 2017 budget, with two riders pegs deficit at 2.322 trillion naira and makes zero allocation for fuel subsidy. Now, also there on the front page, that's the first column on the right side, NATCA, that's the Air Traffic Controllers Association, raises alarm over state of Lagos Airport Central Taxiway, that's the central runway, or taxiway, they said. That's the NACTA, Association of Air Traffic Controllers. And we also have the story on the Boko Haram and suicide, which has also been taken. But another story that is also on the front page there is another global cyber attack likely today. And that's according to experts. Of course, the story has been on since the weekend of a number of countries that have been impacted by the attacks on cyber systems globally. And also there, Macron sworn in as president of France. That story is in greater detail on the inside. And TED Fund uncovers how contractors and academic staff siphon funds. That story also is in greater detail. And federal government seeks foreign investors for smart cities project and plans summit in June. Claire.
Okay, quickly now before we round up this segment. Gunmen killed 21 in Niger community. Of course, said that had already been taken. But the story, lead story on the front page of the Daily Trust. 16 varsities award 3,499 first-class degrees in 5 years. And just below that story, you can find a breakdown of the degrees by first generation universities and of course the second generation universities, and that's just it. Other stories trending at the bottom. Banks post 61 billion naira extra profit in 2016 despite recession, and of course other stories. Demolition, APC chieftain sues El-Rufai for 500 million naira damages, and I was sent on suicide mission for refusing marriage proposal. Again, Kingsley read out that story earlier. Quickly now, Omini, just before we round off.
The one about cyberspace, the DigiNIT at the weekend has sent a warning to all Nigerians, all MDAs, to be very wary and proactive regarding plans by such move. And I think it's a warning to Nigerians to really step up their game. Quickly, the Senate is seriously going to probe some banks in Nigeria for fraud to the tune of $62.9 billion capital flight from the country. Spanning between 2009 to 2016, and I believe that will be a good jack-up into the budget as they plan to fund the budget from looted funds. Basically, the 39-year-old has taken leadership in France, and he has talked about the fact that he is coming to restore the confidence by the people of French. But I'm surprised that most of the people can't tell the story away. I think this, given the fact that he's coming as an independent candidate, is likely going to sweep the political wave in France.
Ominia then, of course, sir, would like to thank you, Debian today, of course, sitting in for Bayo, who is, of course, taking a well-deserved leave. So we'll get to see more of you. See you tomorrow then. All right then. All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll be talking, of course, in discussion.
Hear the call of change. Stand up, Nigeria. Change is here and it's going to stay. Change begins with you. Oh yeah, make we go. Go to so let the change begin from within. Look at you, Ogerola. Change begins with you and me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me.
The National Institute for Cultural Orientation, NICO, in collaboration with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture, invites the general public to a 2-day annual roundtable on cultural orientation, ATCO, with the theme Nigerian Indigenous Language Newspapers and National Development. The event, which will have the Honorable Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, as the chief host, will be chaired by Senator Matthew Ohoyide, Chairman, Senate Committee on Culture and Tourism. Special guest of honor, His Excellency Malam Nasir El-Rufai, Executive Governor, Kaduna State, while the Emir of Zazau, Alhaji Shehu Idris, will be the Royal Father. Keynote speaker, Sam Nda Isaiah, Chairman and Publisher, Leadership Newspapers, while Professor Olu Obafemi of the University of Ilorin will be the moderator. Date, 15th to 16th May 2017. Venue, Arewa House, Kaduna. Time, 11 a.m. prompt. NICO, Harnessing Culture for National Development. Associate Professor, Bakle Faubiri Ayakoroma, Executive Secretary, NICO. Announcer.
It is with joy that I've received Our Excellency's gifts.
I want to say that may God continue to bless and reward her. And so, on behalf of Garki Hospital, we are grateful.
All right, time for action now and time for our conversation to begin. And we start this way. The amendment of the Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas NLNG Act 2017 by the House of Representatives has been met with mixed feelings, especially from some players in the oil and gas sector, of course, who described it as anti-investment and not in the interests of the country. For starters, let's listen to Oyeyemi Ajayi's backgrounder to set the tune for our conversation.
The Nigerian Liquefied Natural Gas NLNG was established in 1989 to produce liquefied natural gas for Nigerian export. It is a joint venture with Nigeria having 49% equity share, and it is represented by NNPC alongside Shell, Total and ENI petroleum companies having their shares as well. With a capital outlay of $6 billion, NLNG has generated over $90 billion in revenue. Despite this growing success, there have been issues and concerns over the company's operations, which include the non-payment of 3% of NLNG's annual budget to NDDC and the removal of guarantees and assurances provided for in the existing act. This and the fact that flaring activities by the company have resulted to more environmental and health hazards in the Niger Delta made many to question the rationale behind the company's existence. Consequently, more groups and individuals started seeking answers to some of the issues. The NLNG became a subject of debate at the House of Representatives, leading to a proposed amendment to the Act establishing the organization. The amendment seeks the prevention of total degradation of the oil-producing communities in the Niger Delta region, which is said to have extensively depleted the ecosystem over a long period of time. The proposal had Section 7B to the Principal Act, which provides that notwithstanding Section 7 or any other provision of this Act, the Nigerian Liquefied Natural Gas Limited shall pay 3% of its total annual budget to the Niger Delta Development Commission Fund as required by Section 14, subsection 1 and 2B of the NDDC Act, Establishment Act 2000. While the new amendment has been passed by the House of Representatives, the Senate is yet to commence debate on the amendment for concurrence and subsequent passage for presidential assent. Just like the NLNG, the proposed amendment has generated controversy as representatives of the organization kick against such move, which they see as counterproductive. They argue that it is against the national interest as it will prevent more foreign investors in addition to gulping almost 40% of NLNG's earnings.
All right, thank you very much there, Oyemi Ajayi, for that background report. Now we have guests with us here in the studios to discuss this subject matter in greater detail. First, we'd like to welcome Honorable Leo Ogo, who is the Minority Leader of the House of Representatives and the sponsor of the bill on the amendment of the NLNG Act. Honorable Leo Ogo, a pleasure to have you join us on the program this morning.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we also have with us here in the studios Dr. Kudo Eresia Eke, is General Manager External Relations of the Nigerian Liquefied Natural Gas Limited. Dr. Kudo Eke, a pleasure to have you on the program.
Good morning, Nigeria. Nice to be here.
Okay, and also with us is a lawyer, of course, a familiar face on Good Morning Nigeria, the former Secretary General of the Nigerian Bar Association, Mazi Afam Osigwe. Mazi, I'd like to have you with us on the program this morning.
Thank you so very much.
Okay. All right, if we have connections to other one or two of our network centers, we'll get a guest to join us from that remote location. First, as we indicated, Leo Ogo, you're the sponsor of the bill that has kicked up quite some dust. In the first instance, what was your motivation for seeking an amendment to an act that appears, to stakeholders in particular and then shareholders that all is well?
Well, first, let me thank you for this wonderful opportunity and be able to throw some light in respect of this proposed amendment. Let me state that the LNG Act itself was a decree passed far back 1989. And by the clear provision of Section 315, it became an act of the National Assembly, subject to some level of modifications. That is what the opening provision states. When you look at that particular act, you will see some kind of obnoxious clauses. Fortunately for us, the geopolitical zone where they are operating at the moment has this NDDC. The National Assembly, in their wisdom, passed an act stipulating clearly that all oil companies and gas processing companies should contribute 3% of their budget to the development of the zone. Fortunately, all the oil companies are abiding by this act. LNG is a company where the federal government has 49% stake, making them the majority shareholders. So it is so sad and unfortunate that such a company where we have such a huge stake will not contribute in line with an enactment of a National Assembly to the development of the zone. Based on some of these unacceptable, obnoxious incentives, we decided to say no. To simplify this issue, let's make a clear provision and state it black and white in their act that they are to contribute this 3% in line with what other people are doing. Because when you watch this zone itself, this is the zone that produces the golden egg. And we have all, in all agreement, stated that this zone itself have suffered so much deprivation, high pollution, gas flaring has become the order of the day, major health challenges, and a host of other polluted implications. These people need some level of implementation of touch as from these oil majors. And I think this thing, for me, if you ask, is even to the advantage of LNG, because we are trying on the long run to provide further security in making sure that the place is safe for them to even do their business. You know, so I really don't see anything wrong in this amendment, because when you look at the act itself, as it is, the incentives are supposed to be for a period of time. It is not an open-ended incentive. You don't just sit in an office and enjoy an open-ended incentive. Government earns its revenue from taxes. So if a government will not get its revenue from taxes, then I think at the end of the day there will be no government. You know, so I really want to see what is the grievance, the mistakes, or the mischief that they see in this amendment.
All right, let me refer you to an interview granted sometime, and a quotation by you, you know, as an important reason for, you know, sponsoring this bill for the amendment. You said it is important, just to take your quotation in part, it is very important that we appreciate the enormity of the danger present in the region for us to act quick and as a people hold the NLNG responsible for unnecessary gas flaring using this amendment. Can you tell us a bit of what you know about the is that statement by you? Did you grant that interview?
I probably may have to recall.
Yes, but you were quoted to have said that it is necessary to hold the NLNG responsible for unnecessary gas flaring using this amendment.
No, at that, NLNG does not go into gas flaring. Okay. It is the oil majors.
Okay. So you do agree that NLNG does not...
They are a gas processing company.
Okay.
In line with the NDDC Act. Gas processing companies are supposed to contribute 3% of their budget. And it is here very clear in black and white. Look at it here. 3% of their total annual budget of oil-producing companies operating onshore and offshore in the Niger Delta area, including gas processing companies. You know, so to me, I really want to see the problems that this whole amendment will cause, because we're hearing a lot of...
So you do not hold the NLNG responsible for gas flaring?
No, not at all, not at all.
All right, thank you.
All right, well, Honorable Leoga, we'll come back to you. You've given the rationale for sponsoring the bill, a number of issues. Happily, we have Kudo Resia here with us. Of course, he's been working in LNG for quite a while. You know, of course, the legal issues that Honorable Leoga is raising. What is the attitude of NLNG to this whole proposal to amend the enabling law?
Well, the attitude of Nigeria LNG is that is of defense of Nigeria, because we see this act as one that is inimical to the economy and the progress of Nigeria. As I sit here, it's my desire that many Nigerians do listen, and listen well.
And they are listening, of course, because we're the largest television network, by the way. Yes.
Now, this argument had gone to court. First, let me admit that most of us here are laymen. These arguments had gone to court. NDDC had taken Nigeria LNG to court. And this case had gone through all the layers of court, up to the Supreme Court of the land, and all the judgments had been in favor of Nigeria LNG. Now, so what is happening here is that having failed at the Supreme Court, NDDC now goes to the National Assembly to get the National Assembly to change the law. This is a dangerous precedent for Nigeria. After the Supreme Court has ruled, you then go to the National Assembly.
Sorry, for the benefit of our viewers, what was the substance of the litigation?
That is it.
Essentially, exactly the point that 3% of our annual budget should be paid to NDDC. And our argument is simple. First of all, luckily he has admitted that Nigerian LNG is a cleaner of the environment and not a desecrator of the environment in any way, which is great. Now, the spirit of the NDDC Act is to ensure that those who produce from Niger Delta recompense in some form. Nigeria LNG doesn't produce anything from the Niger Delta. What it does is that it buys gas. It buys gas the same way that fertilizer companies buy gas. It buys gas the same way that petrochemical companies buy gas. It buys gas the same way that electricity companies buy gas. So it is targeted for reasons that are not obvious to us, at least. In addition to that, and which is the greater concern, is that it took Nigeria 30 years of struggle to get Nigeria LNG. 30 years since the late 50s. It was not until 1989 when an act, which we call the decree, was put in place that investors then had confidence to invest. It took them only 3 weeks after the act was put in place for the investment to be made, to show you that the backbone upon which the company rests is indeed that act. And the government gave guarantees and assurances which have been validated over numerous administrations to say that those guarantees and assurances will not be tampered with. Indeed, the central bank governor wrote letters reassuring. The Minister of Finance wrote letters reassuring. The Minister of Justice and Attorney General wrote letter reassuring. Those are the strengths upon which these investments were made. Now, our worry is, if we become a promise breaker, a desecrator of sanctimonious agreements, non-abiding with agreements, then Nigeria becomes a pariah. We are not in that state now. We need all the help we can get. We need finance. We need investments in our nation. This is Nigeria's most successful company. If we could do this to our own, what signal are we sending to the rest of the world? And in addition to that, I'd just like to say that this is the beginning, if we allow this go, of the end of Nigeria LNG. Because you're really hitting at the taproot, the foundation of the company, at the time when the world, we all know what the oil prices are, we all know what energy prices are. When everybody's supporting their own oil and gas companies to prosper, you find that happening in the United States, you find that happening in Malaysia, in Oman, in every part of the world. Here in Nigeria, we are digging at the foundation of our representation in the world, as far as that's concerned.
All right, well, Kudo, just one more time, for the benefit of our viewers. The Supreme Court, you said, decided on the case involving 3% payment of 3% of the annual budget of the NLNG. What was the substance of that decision? What we call the ratio in law. I'm not a layman, by the way. I found it's not as well. On what basis did the Supreme Court give its decision? They did say that the NDDC could not ask or request or expect NLNG to pay. What was the grievance?
Basically, it was my view. It was a respect for the guarantees and assurances. To say these guarantees have been given, there ought to be no amendment to this decree. In any case, or this act. And in any case, most of don't worry the plea of the word of the decree act, because most of the laws we abide by today anyway, and the National Assembly will comply, are mostly decrees. So there's no begging that question. So in any case, this, just to tell you, if NLNG will begin to witness the demise of NLNG, it is because of this. At this time, we need investment of at least $1 billion annually to keep NLNG running full. Now, the money is going to be coming straight again from the investors. But with this kind of behavior, this kind of attitude, this kind of amendments, obviously that kind of money will not be coming. We need 25 billion because we are expanding. We need 25 billion again from investors, imminent, that's supposed to come in a year or two. Now, this is the same amendment that will drive all of those away. We're talking about the Niger Delta, where if we went into the Train 7, 18,000 jobs would be created. Now, I want you to imagine level of security that we can have and peace if we're able to provide 18,000 jobs. That we are kicking away because of this amendment. But all hope is not lost, because I believe that the Senate is there and they're listening, and most of them have business persuasions, and we'll do something about this.
Let's bring Mr. Mazi Afam. Mazi Afam, this appears to be, a legal issue. The Supreme Court, the Apex Court had ruled on this, but let's hear from you. Is there any issue with the Act setting up the NLNG that we really don't understand, or the National Assembly doesn't understand?
Now, when a nation goes into business transaction with companies in, if you permit my use of that word, in a volatile region like the Niger Delta, and where multi-billion-dollar investments will be involved, there are usually assurances and guarantees given so that these investors will be assured that their investments will be protected not only from expropriation, but so that there will be certainty before they go into that terrain. And I think that gives rise to the NLNG Act. And by that act, Nigeria gave assurances that, look, if you invest, the fiscal regimes will be protected by this act, and we're not going to do anything to alter that without the written consent of the government, the shareholders, and the company. And by the unilateral attempt by the National Assembly to amend this law to impose a levy, which the Supreme Court has ruled that the NDDC cannot impose on the NLNG. Nigeria is breaking that assurance and is making Nigeria a doubtful destination by foreign investors. And coming at a time when Nigeria is in their need of foreign direct investment, this sends a terrible signal. Nobody would want to invest. And security does not mean getting more money. It's ensure that there will be flow of investment into that area to create employment, so that people will be sure that their investment is protected, so that laws that freely enacted by a country will be respected. And I think we're not doing that at this time.
Okay, let me, I'm the only layman here. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know
I need to step in.
Yes, but just hold on. I need to also ask, you have mentioned the part that the Act setting up the NLNG, provides that for any amendment to be done, it has to be in agreement, written consent of all the parties involved. But there are also other clauses to that Act, which says that, first of all, it has to be, the holidays, would expire within a period of time, which is 10 years.
And there are tax incentives, tax holiday. Yes, there's tax holiday and fiscal regime. There are different things.
Just a moment, you enlighten us. And then the second part of it, of the Act, also says that, whichever comes first, that it expires when the cumulative sales price of gas, attains a particular, price level, which is $3 US. That's from when you celebrate your anniversary.
Let me save you the trouble. All the incentives have all expired.
Thank you.
Nigeria LNG is now paying tax, which is the reason Nigeria LNG is the highest tax-paying institution in Nigeria. To date, we have paid $5.5 billion in taxes. What are we talking about? Nigeria LNG has provided $15 billion of dividends. What are we talking about? We have paid 51 billion naira in terms of levies and taxes.
Is LNG paying levy to NIMASA?
Of course, you know that's disputed. It is precisely because of this element of the Act.
Okay.
All right. All right, Leo, I mean, you were eager to say something.
Yeah.
Go ahead and then
let me first and foremost state very clearly that, I'm hearing from you from the first time. I've been looking at this whole report. I'm not aware that this matter got to the Supreme Court, but that is not even on place. I knew it ended up at the Court of Appeal. Now, let's call a spade, and let's be very, very sincere to ourselves. You see, where you look at the ownership structure, you are telling us you have paid $5 billion to the federal government. Yes. But let me also tell you that the federal government invested in line with the risk of knowing that they were doing business. I'll give you a clear ownership structure of this company, which is made up of Shell, Total, and ENI. These are the same IOCs. When you look at that agreement, Doctor, look at the sincerity in that agreement. Custom duties you don't pay. All right? You don't pay any duties. We're talking about the project Nigeria. Are we talking about how we can develop this country? Because you're speaking as if somebody is trying to tax LNG. No, nobody is trying to do that. What we are saying is that LNG is a going concept that is doing business in this country. You look at the revenue profile of that company. I am not interested, but I'm a stakeholder because I'm part of the federal government. I have invested, federal government money has been invested. Now, look at what price, the price at which you are even buying gas, which are not even the subject matter of today. Because you are taking the same gas at almost a ridiculous price, process it and sell. But good, because we are stakeholders. But if the law of your land, of which you are a citizen, stipulate clearly that this is what should be done, how do you expect me, as a lawmaker, line by line, the provisions of the Constitution, to accept those obnoxious clauses that are inserted in that act? It is totally unacceptable.
Which are the obnoxious clauses?
You say you will not pay anything, custom duties, you won't pay, even your subcontractors don't pay custom duties. And who are these subcontractors? It's the same IOCs. So let's be fair to ourselves.
Okay, Honorable Leo Ogo.
Yes, please.
Now, as you rightly indicated, and that's the spirit and letter of the Constitution, the LNG decree is a deemed act of the National Assembly. And the provisions therein are also clear. Provisions of the NLNG Act, which is being amended now, namely that for you to tamper with the clear provisions of that act, you'll seek the concurrence of the shareholders. Was it such a big challenge as a sponsor of the bill to say, look, listen, this is what we are seeking to do. Why don't we seek the concurrence of the shareholders?
They will have that privilege at the public hearing. That is the essence of having a public hearing. They will be invited. I will not go to LNG and tell them, I want to amend this act. The essence of them coming in to contribute their own comment is done at the public hearing. Let me also advise here that as a lawmaker, guided by the provision of Section 4, Sub 2 of the Constitution, we can amend laws, we can repeal acts, and reenact laws. That's right. Now, if you are given the privilege and the opportunity by 360 members to come and defend a specific clause that they consider that is alien to the process of lawmaking, it is your responsibility to come and do that. So that privilege is clearly given to them, and they were in the public hearing.
What again, for the benefit of our viewers who may not have had access to reports arising from the public hearing, what vibrations did you get from the IOCs in terms of their responses to the proposed amendment?
Well, first, I think the drive there for them was purely profit, and they went totally against it. But what I am saying, and what we are saying as Parliament is that, fine, you should do your business, but you must pay taxes to the government. If the law says that this is what you should pay it. You see, there are some clauses there that we said you can as well allow them to go with those clauses. Because my strong belief is that national interest comes before any individual interest. And I don't want you people to be looking at LNG as if it is privately owned.
What is the national interest in this?
The national interest is that we must collectively contribute to the development of this country. It is impossible for a company to sit in our office and say, no, we will not respect this law. This is what we will respect. This is the law we will not respect. It is not done in any country. And I want to ask the LNG, in which country, tell me any of the countries in this world that you can enjoy such incentives that you are enjoying here?
All right, okay, go ahead.
I will have
another question for you.
Qatar enjoys similar incentives.
Open-ended incentive.
Oman, supported by government, enjoys similar incentives. Malaysia enjoys similar incentives. Angola, next door, enjoys similar incentives. Indeed, the United States now is supporting its own gas companies to do virtually the same. So there is no question that nations that are interested in the development of the oil and gas have to invest. Qatar earns now $61 billion annually out of this. Nigeria earns has earned up to 15 billion, and more could still be earned if we support that. Let me also say this. Let me also say
have the figures.
Now, let me put it in context. What Nigeria invested was 2.5 billion. Now,
2.5 what?
$2.5 billion.
In when?
Okay? $2.5 billion. What it has, you're not the interviewer, what it has earned as of today, is multiples of that. $15 billion in terms of dividends. company has generated $90 billion in terms of revenue.
Beautiful.
It has paid through gas purchase $23 billion. Now, it has paid in terms of taxes. It ranks the highest, as I mentioned, 5.5 billion. What else do you expect a good company to deliver?
Okay, all right. Kudoike, thanks a lot. But let's take a look at Mazi Afam-Osigwe, because Dr. Kudo Eresi made the point that, look, the fact that the Supreme Court has already, according to him, given a decision on this matter, therefore it will be obnoxious to seek to pass a piece of legislation that will counteract what the Supreme Court has decided. Quite clearly, I mean, in jurisprudence, one of the ways to change the law, assuming, the courts have so decided, is to return to the legislature. Is there anything wrong with going back to the legislature if, of course, the matter went to court and the litigant, of course, got defeated, that you can have recourse to the National Assembly to pass a law?
Well, let me say, the fact that judiciary has interpreted the NDCC Act to say, oh, no, it does not apply to the NLNG, does not mean that the legislature cannot do that. But my worry is that we have a wrong way of approaching things. If the law has provided a safety net and say, look, we can amend this law, but you should get the parties to agree in writing. What is so difficult about doing that? And if I may ask again, sir, why should it be at the stage of public hearing that the companies will get opportunity to say whether they consent or not? Since the government is an investor in this company and has given these assurances and guarantees, what's so difficult about government sitting down with them and saying, you know what? If you are not paying customs, I think you should pay. We are losing so much money. We are talking about trains 7 and 8. With respect to trains 1 to 6, you should pay customs duty, or we should pay a certain percentage on the proposed trains. Now, we think you should contribute something to the NDDC, and the parties sit down and reach an agreement which is passed on to the legislature to perform their duties, because it is taken that the current legislature has fettered its discretion by giving these assurances and guarantees. Because if they go ahead to amend it without getting this consent, there will be consequences to be faced by Nigeria. It does not mean they cannot amend it, but there will be financial consequences, and investor confidence will be affected, and investors may withhold further investment in the project. What is so difficult about reaching this agreement? Why put the cart before the horse? Why draft a bill and say, I must do it? And again, I must caution about the choice of language being used may tend to portray the legislature are trying to incite the host communities against such companies by making it look as if they are your problem, they don't want to contribute to your development. And this need not be so. Parties can sit down in a round table.
But the host communities are already raising issues with what NLNG, have outlined in terms of their social responsibility.
I beg your pardon. That cannot be true. We live in the most peaceful. We live in the most peaceful host community in Nigeria, and that is Bonny. This is a community that we have provided electricity for 24 hours. We have more fidelity of supply of electricity in the average house in Bonny than in Leo Ogo's house.
Yeah, but
now, let me say this: we have invested deeply. We have invested deeply in our communities. As of today, we have also promised the community in a new memorandum of understanding 3 billion every year into a development fund for that same community for 25 years running. So questions about community development, if there's an example, an epitome, want to show it is Nigeria LNG.
Yes. All right. What are the issues?
First, let me take that issue in respect of your social corporate responsibilities. The gas product that you are using today is not only from Bonny. It comes from the whole Niger Delta region.
Buy it,
Please, can you let me land?
Yes.
It's from the whole Niger Delta region that is saddled with these oil problems. But it is important, and thank God you raised a very fundamental issue. A committee was set up between NDDC and LNG. I sat to agree on terms and conditions on how this money should be arranged and paid. At almost the concluding stage, this is information before me also, they backed out.
Why?
That is something I don't know. So for us,
it's obvious why they backed out.
So what is obvious? Why did they back out?
So why? I mean, I wasn't there, but you can guess.
Yeah.
Their contention is that the provision about contributing a percentage of their budget, annual budget, does not apply to the LNG. And if the court has affirmed in their favor, like I said, and you seek to amend the law to include them the parties should sit down and reach an agreement.
I did agree with you.
Prior to amendment, because and it is not for NDDC. NDDC should not be a party to the discussion because it also looks.
Gentlemen, sorry, just a minute, Honorable Leogo, let's clarify this.
Yes.
Assuming the matter ended at the Court of Appeal and there were no further steps to go to the Supreme Court, that is the law, that is the decision reached that all the parties are supposed to abide by. A matter doesn't necessarily have to go to the Supreme Court.
Absolutely.
Before it becomes.
I agree with you.
That's the nature of our study decisis.
Exactly.
Okay? Now, but another point that I would like you to respond to.
Yeah.
AFAM says, and that again is also obvious, that, look, if the parties sat down to discuss the terms and agree, that would have been an executive responsibility.
Beautiful.
And that brought it over to the legislature. Why did it appear that the House or the sponsor of the bill tended to have circumvented or circumnavigated that executive first step of seeking to negotiate? The business of negotiation is not between the House and the shareholders of Nigerian LNG. Why did the sponsor or sponsors seek to circumnavigate the executive in the negotiation process to say, look, agree on this, rather than waiting for them and say, look, public hearing, come, here you are?
Yeah, but let me also probably bring you a little bit back. This issue has not been an issue of just yesterday.
That's right.
It's a long-running issue. And I have said time without number that these even incentives, like you all know, have all expired. This particular amendment does not even affect the Train 7 and 8 that they are shouting all over the press about. Hold on, please. It is about what you are operating at this present condition. So, if they start at a particular time and they couldn't reach a conclusion, because they set up a committee, and you are aware you set up a committee where you people met severally in this committee. At the end of the day, they backed out. For me, as a lawmaker, I know that the NDDC Act is an act in which the National Assembly, the only act where we vetoed the president, who refused to assent to it. It becomes important, very, very important, because the first even issue here is about whether they are gas processing company. And he knows that the Court of Appeal stated very clearly that, yes, LNG is a gas processing company. And here it is in black and white that gas processing companies must contribute their own quotas to the development of NDDC, to the development of the geopolitical zone. When you say you are probably developing a host community, there is nothing wrong with that. It is your social corporate responsibility. But there are a lot of other zones that NDDC also is looking after. And it becomes important that these funds you are talking about, you think it is your profit. It is not. These are all deductibles. All right? And if other companies are paying it, why are you finding it so difficult?
Okay, let me bring Dr. Kudo here, because I just want to look at NLNG's social responsibility. Because if you are, operating within an area, it behoves on you to, of course, make contributions by way of paying levies to the commission, that is responsible, for that. But again, someone did say that the story of Bonny is like a tale of two cities, and I'm quoting somebody who lives in Bonny. The last time I was in Bonny, just after Peterside Crossing, it was just like a full-on city. You go to Onelga, the same thing. Onelga, is one of the largest oil producing in River State. You go there, it's the same thing. So now, people say that NLNG is appealing to sentiments rather than, looking at the devastation that is being meted onto the region where you operate.
Yes, we have to appeal to sentiments, but we also have to appeal to facts. We cannot run from facts. Facts are stubborn. The thing is, NLNG is being targeted. NLNG buys gas. And I had said, you haven't questioned Leo. Why is petrochemical not being charged the same? Why are those who are involved in electricity not being charged the same? Why are those who are involved in using gas for fertilizer not being charged the same? Why is NLNG being singled out? Gas, yes, but it's not the only one. Number two, he mentions the fact that this has nothing to do with Train 7. It has everything to do with Train 7. The moment we pass this amendment and essentially abrogate the act, because the act will be without the guarantees and assurances, it is actually postponed. It's finished. yeah, then the investors' confidence is totally destroyed. They are the ones that we're relying upon to bring in $25 billion. And let me also say this. Luckily, he admits that some of the shareholders are, or those also functioning, at least their Nigerian counterparts in the Niger Delta. Shell pays the NDDC levy. Total pays the NDDC levy. ENI pays the NDDC levy. Now, Nigerian LNG goes and buys gas upon which all the NDDC levies have been paid. And then you ask NLNG to pay another 3%. What are you doing? Double taxation.
All right. You are not buying gas. You are buying gas from NNPC. Please, sir. You see, let's try and call a spade a spade. You may end up probably saying that what I'm saying is wrong. You know that the price at which you are buying this gas is not what the other companies that are producing. In Nigeria, for the production are buying this gas, you are buying for export. And I think, you know, much as I would probably want us to be fair to each other, you see, I see this negative campaign as very, very wrong steps. This is a project you know everybody is interested in. Shell you are talking about here has only 25% interest in this company. Now, as a nation, you know that you have kept some funds behind for these particular projects. Hold on, sir. And if that is the situation, why are you now trying to say that the 3% you will contribute, the 3% of your budget that you will contribute to the development of this zone will destroy a project of 25 billion? I call that very cheap blackmail, as far as I'm concerned.
Let me just illustrate. Maybe it's very difficult to understand, but I think maybe the way that you will feel it is pretty simple. It's like an egg. The guarantees are like guarantees and assurance. It's like liking it to an egg. Now, it doesn't matter whether you puncture a little hole in that egg, it's broken. It is that guarantee and assurance that we are trying to protect. That is what the rule of law has given. Now, the moment we violate the rule of law by puncturing the guarantees and assurances, it is finished.
That is without due process. And the
without due process.
The due process says, listen, let the shareholders sit down, negotiate, reach an agreement, and then proceed. There's one issue, though. I mean, because if you under international, energy law, you'll find that what we are dealing with here, I mean, there is insistence on what you already have in the law. Those are referred to usually as stabilization clauses. Exactly. The alternative will be renegotiation clauses. So we have no idea why Nigeria settled for stabilization rather than renegotiation clauses. But in a sense, you can imply that, okay, there are still renegotiation clauses. So let the parties sit down to negotiate. We remember what happened in oil-producing entities like Libya. I mean, some governments, have been rattled, by the governments of the IOCs, where those companies are based, overthrow them and so on and so forth on account of stabilization clauses, or where there was nationalization of those oil companies on account of what the Fed were, as Leo Ogo has indicated, obnoxious clauses embedded in the stabilization clauses. But one point, Honorable Leo Ogo, yes. Let's say from a business perspective, and this is already what is there in the piece of legislation. Does it make any business sense to require a company to pay 3% of its budget, not of its profits, budget? Because your budget would indicate, your operating costs. You are not even sure yet whether, of course, you have a return on your investment or on your budget. But here you are saying 3% of your budget. Could that be looked at?
It is the enabling law, but it is the enabling law of our land.
It's what we're seeking to interrogate. It's there already. This is all part of the discussion.
But be also mindful of the fact that this act you see, which is these incentives and all the things you are saying, are more acts that were written by the IOCs. All right?
Yeah, but we have them as
law.
We have them as laws.
I told you from the beginning that they are decrees. And if I wake up as a lawmaker and I find a decree to be obnoxious, because the provision of Section 315 brings it into conformity.
As existing law.
As existing law, are you saying I lack the right, the privilege and the opportunity of amending such laws?
Okay, let me pause you.
Yes,
yes, he will continue.
I'm just saying, just hold on a second before we bring another guy, because this is very important. From the business perspective. Look, why the law is there, as you have indicated, of course, there was an override of the president's veto. Why would it be 3% of a company's operating budget?
Not profit.
Budget. I don't know. Listen, I mean, if you run businesses, 3% of your budget, you haven't started operating your budget. So look, 3% of it, slice it off.
You might find out that even 3% of the budget is far lower even in the end, in respect of this particular budget of LNG, all right, than even taking into the profits. Because if you look at the 3% of the budget, it's far, far lower when compared to the profit. But let me tell you, you might probably ask, why did the National Assembly took this step? You realize that this zone have suffered so much depredation. They have suffered so much environmental pollution. These people are the same people that eat polluted fish, drink polluted water in the interest of the Project Nigeria. And the government in itself decided to set up an interventionist agency to support these people that live here. Right. And I don't see anything wrong with it. Even I probably want to say that 3% for me is even on the lower side when you compare the margins of what these oil companies are making from this particular area.
All right, let me quickly bring into our conversation our guest from our Lagos Network Center, of course, Victor Eremosele. He's a former Chief Officer, Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas, NLNG, and yes, Chief Financial Officer. Mr. Eremosele, thank you for joining us from Lagos. And quickly, I don't know what your response will be, but do you find the act, the NLNG setting up, the act setting up the NLNG Act obnoxious, and does the legislature have the right to amend it?
Use is not obnoxious. I don't think obnoxious is an appropriate word. The NLNG Act was there for a purpose. Let's have it in perspective. I mean, I've been listening carefully to the legislature defending it stoutly. For 30 years, between 1969 and the very first cargo, 30 years passed. There wasn't a single LNG plant here. Today, we're lucky to have an LNG plant that is producing, that has expanded, and is adding value. The Bonny Island plant is Africa's largest single industrial plant of that nature. So we have to, you get and give in return. So you have agreed on something, you stick to it. That's what gentlemen do. My problem is in Nigeria, we tend to always want to reinvent the wheel. Why do we want to reinvent the wheel? Do it exactly the way everybody does elsewhere to attract investment. The last investment, I think, was done, 2007 when we had Train 6. Since then, there's been no train built in 10 years, no train built. When we talk about it, when we still have two other entities that have been on the drawing board for nearly 20 years now, 17 years. I'm talking about Brass and Olokola LNG. Why do we have that? Simply because the climate is not right. International investment will go to only places where the enabling environment is right. We've done something right. Just keep replicating it. We should stop doing things that are uniquely Nigerian simply because it is convenient to do so. And in my humble view, there's quite a lot we can do to move it forward. So the LNG Act, as far as it should be allowed to stay exactly as it is without having to try to tweak it here and there. It has served its purpose, and I don't see why we should actually change it. What I think legislative energies should actually be spent on is saying, why have we in 70 years not had all the other plants? We should do something about it. And there's quite a lot we can do about it. Create the enabling environment to ensure localized build, Brass LNG build, Train 7 comes on stream. Because these windows of opportunities will not last forever. I think, let me pause there, and you can ask further question if you want to.
All right, well, Mr. Eremosele, thank you very much for your perspective. And by the way, that's about some weeks ago, we actually also discussed the Bonny LNG project as well as the OK LNG project. And one of our guests on that occasion was former Group Managing Director of NNPC, that's Dr. Gaius Obaseki. Plus, other guests who joined us from different locations, indicating that it was important, of course, to prioritize Train 7 of Bonny LNG, and then move on to Brass, and then to OK, because OK probably has the biggest of the challenges. Now, you say that, well, let the law stay the way it is, but you already have embedded in the law an opportunity for an amendment based, of course, on the concurrence of all the shareholders. One of the key things that we've also discussed here, there's a guest here to say, look, a negotiation should have first taken place in the executive branch and then the other shareholders before proceeding to the legislature. One question I raised earlier was, look, what is the business sense in saying I should have off 3% of my budget for CSR? As a former CFO, that is Chief Financial Officer, how does that, or how would that normally impact on any business if ab initio 3% of what you are budgeting is straight away devoted to CSR when you don't know whether you break even or otherwise? I know that the oil industry has a very complicated accounting process.
The science behind the 3%, clearly, I don't behind the 3%. I think that has been done for quite a while. And I like the whole idea of actually NDDC as an interventionist thing. The whole idea was that, oh, these guys in the oil and gas are polluting the space or whatever and degradation. Let us now have something to compensate. So let's have an interventionist stuff. I don't know. We can now look at the track record of NDDC. Have they done exactly what they expected to do? And then you can equally weigh that against what is LNG doing in that space. I don't know, they do have a program, and if they execute that program, they're talking about a mini Dubai in Bonny Island. If that happens, probably that is good. The point is that they don't necessarily need a legislative gun on their heads to get these things done. What you basically need is you say, oh, can you cooperate with NDDC and NLNG? Can you cooperate? Even while I was there, I mean, there was a lot of talk about cooperation, and I'm sure that Kudo is there to confirm that what level of cooperation there is. I want that cooperation is there. You don't need a 3% or any percent. What you do need is development in the area, like the legislator rightly said. And I think if people deserve that development, they should get it. But it doesn't have to be that. The original spirit behind it was for oil producers. Let it be said clear. LNG is midstream. It's like a refinery. It's like any other of such plant. So it's right in the middle of the pack. And therefore, we should be consistent with our own rules. The world is watching. Nigeria is not there in isolation, just doing its own thing. So we don't want to be a laughing stock because we're doing what we want to do here. We should just do things right and do it the way it's done everywhere else.
Mr. Ramosele, let me come back to Dr. Kudo. I don't know, looking at this act and the purpose, you know, for it and for setting up the NLNG, do you think that purpose has been served? Because we do know that sometimes when these exemptions are granted, it is basically to allow the venture to recoup, you know, the investment. Has NLNG recouped its investment, initial investment?
I guess I have reeled out some figures here. I've also told you how much we invested as a nation and what we have got back in return. How did we do that? We did that because we were reinvesting. We grew from a 2-train operation to a 6-train operation. That is how much that Nigeria LNG has developed. Now, let me also say that much of what is coming out of NLNG now, 70% of it goes to the government. So how else do you want to be received?
70?
70%, because 49% plus all the taxes that we have mentioned. We've said already that we don't have it. We're not enjoying any more tax holidays. That is long expired. We're paying fully.
So you do.
Just a moment. Let me try to respond. You know, all we're saying is the rule of law needs to be obeyed for the benefit of our country. Otherwise, investors will think that we are lawless. And if they think so, then investments will not come. This is the main argument. In terms of supporting our local communities, I mean, we are already voluntarily, no one asked us. We set aside 60 billion.
For 17 years, this act has served the purpose of the NLNG, and you think it could go on in perpetuity?
What do you mean? Who is NLNG?
That is the question.
Who is NLNG?
And that's what you have to
NLNG is
answer.
essentially the federal government.
Very good.
Yes, essentially the federal government. So anything you're doing against Nigeria LNG is doing against Nigeria.
It is the same federal government that asked the NLNG to make some, you know, payment to NIMASA, which you also, you know, did not comply with.
Yeah, that matter is sub judice.
That matter is sub judice.
Okay, but what is so wrong in obeying the law? Can I come in here, please? Can I come in here?
Honorable Leo.
Yeah, let me advise. Doctor, I see you like somebody who has the interest of LNG at heart. But I can tell you that most of these guarantees you are talking about has not in any way been tampered with this amendment. This is purely a levy. Hold on, sir. It's a levy which is allowed because your levies have expired. Your
tax holiday
has expired. Yeah. But let me advise, and this advice is this, that, you see, we must appreciate that at a particular time, all these products will finish, and everybody investing in this business is interested in the profit margin that he or she is going to make from it. If today there is no more gas in Nigeria, Shell, all the other companies like probably we are fighting for their interest today, will not spend a day in this country. I think it is important that as a nation, the only major source of revenue to every government is tax. And when I see some of these arguments, that, oh, this thing will drive this thing away, it will do this, it will do that, I think my heart bleeds. Bleeds because we are not being sincere to ourselves. And I really don't know where it will take us.
How would you respond to the statement made by Dr. Kudo? Of course, let's, for the benefit of our viewers, he's, excuse me, he's General Manager, External Relations of Bonny LNG. That's why he's speaking the way. Yes, Nigeria LNG. That's why he's speaking the way he's speaking. So, but the point is, look, this is like an ad hominem piece of legislation. It's targeting the LNG, Nigeria LNG, ad hominem, and yet, in the NDDC Act, you have gas processing companies. It's also raised the point that you have those, who are in petrochemicals, those who are also utilizing gas for other purposes, fertilizer and so on and so forth. That's going to kick up quite some more dust. What will be done in this particular regard?
Well, first, I think he has given us some very, very good information. All right, and we are going to work on those informations.
That's all a twist.
That is it. There's nothing wrong with what he has just passed over.
In conclusion, let's bring in Mr. Victor Ramasele from Lagos. What do you think could be the way out to resolve, this controversy?
There's something called peace talks. I think it's good that we have a legislator in the room, so and I'm sure after this program they should shake hands and keep talking about it. But I believe if we can just keep doing things exactly the way others do it everywhere else in the world, it will be great. And I think the easiest way really is to, if possible, drop off this whole idea of the NDDC thing, and you can tweak the NNPC Act if you want to, but tweak it in a way that benefits all parties, and benefits Nigeria, and then benefits investors. That is where we should land. But right now, I think, given where we are, that we're trying to dig ourselves out of a recession, this is the timing really is not really the best. We want to attract as many investors into Nigeria as we can. And I think whatever we do, we should just bear that in mind.
Well, Mr. Ramasele, once again, thank you very much. Afam Osigwe. Look, why some persons would ask, why all this bogey of, we want foreign investors, they don't come, so we have to be careful. The issues have already been outlined. Do we need, to continue to frighten ourselves, by the fact that foreign investment will either stall, or take flight? If things are to be done properly, couldn't we just proceed to do them properly, Mazi?
Well, the two go hand in hand. It's a mono economy, we're dependent on oil, and we'll be deceiving ourselves thinking we can go it alone. And it's the IOCs that are the main JV partners to the NNPC, which acts on behalf of Nigeria. And like we said earlier, if a law has stated the procedure for doing it, what stops us from doing that? Why make so much noise, raise so much dust, when we can achieve that in a table and hold discussions and then proceed to draft the bill? And then why target a particular company? Why not make it a broad-based thing? If we intend to have it, companies that process gas, then bring everybody on stream so that this thing will be an even-handed thing and not be seen that they are targeting LNG probably because they believe that they have a huge budget.
But is it the case, again, now returning to our legal system, the fact that you have a provision in the NLNG Act doesn't mean that a subsequent piece of legislation can't tamper with it. And therefore, if you had an omnibus piece of legislation that deals with some of the issues already contained therein, I mean, that would just be fair and fine.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah, but the point that our firm has raised, why the apparent stampede?
Because this whole discussion has gone on for almost about 10 years plus. It is not just a discussion of yesterday. They know what we are saying, that it is a very, very long way. Even when Stenel Brown was there, this whole discussion was ongoing. And they have actually taken this firm position that, no, they are not gas processing company, they won't do this, they won't do that. And we have no option than to make sure that, it is spelled out in black and white in their act. So for us, I think what we are doing is making sure that they respect the laws of our land.
Okay, Mr. Kudo, if this law, if this amendment, sees the light of day, if it passes through, the Senate concurs and it gets the accent, will the LNG comply, or would you seek legal redress?
If you listen to everything I've said, it's about the rule of law. There are provisions within the Act today that has recommended if there's going to be any distortions, any changes, how it ought to be done. Let us do it that way. That's exactly what Victor was also saying.
Could you just, what would be the next step for the LNG should that happen?
I said the rule of law. We obey the rule of law.
All right.
But the devastation on the Nigerian economy should be very obvious. Now, we have NNPC representing the federal government on this venture. NNPC is positive on the side of Nigeria LNG because it understands the business of oil and gas. The Honorable Minister of Petroleum is positive on the side of NLNG because it understands the business of oil and gas. The Pengasin, the most elitist group in the oil and gas industry, made up of largely Nigerians, is supportive of the Nigeria LNG position.
But the National Assembly that is representing the larger majority of Nigerians do not understand the act. But I'm afraid...
And there are no incentives, there are no provisions in the Act that stipulates that even where we need to amend the law, we must sit down with you people. Because I brought the Act here. I'll give it to you so that you can
gentlemen,
I'm afraid...
Section 7, please.
Section 7. Gentlemen, just wait. I think the Honorable Leo, the point was made that such initial discussions should be between the executive branch, that's by implication the executive branch and the other shareholders. And then plus, of course, the opportunity of representation at your public hearing. That's one. But gentlemen, that's the much that we can take in the course of this conversation. We'd like to thank all of you. Of course, this is a matter that obviously will take on some other point in future. We'd like to thank former Secretary General of Nigerian Bar Association, Mazi Alpha Mosugwe. Always a delight having you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thanks for having me.
We also would like to thank Dr. Kudo Eresi, General Manager, External Relations, Nigeria LNG, that's at Bonny. Kudo, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much. It's in the hands of Nigerians now.
All right. So we also would like to thank the minority leader of the House of Reps, Honorable Leo Ogo. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you very much.
From our Lagos Network Studios, I would like to appreciate Mr. Victor Remosole, former Chief Finance Officer of Nigeria LNG at Bonny. Thank you for your contribution.
And a request of Remosole that both of you shake hands, but I would like you to do that once you step out of the studio. And
no differences at all.
All right, let's quickly take a short break. When we come back, we'll be looking at developments in France.
Admission forms for the 2017-2018 academic session of NTA Television College JAWS into its diploma programs are now on sale. The diploma programs are in film and TV production, broadcast journalism, and TV engineering technology. Applicants are required to have at least 5 credits, including English language and mathematics at SSC, NECO, or GCO levels in not more than 1 sitting. Application forms can be obtained from the TV College Refi JAWS or at any NTA zonal centers nationwide on payment of a no-refundable fee of 7,500 naira in bank draft in favor of NTA Television College. Completed application forms should be returned to the Office of the Academic Secretary, NTA Television College, or the Center of Purchase on or before 28th of July 2017. For further inquiries, please call 0806 980 9807 or 0703 660 7155. NTA Television College, training you to be the best you can be.
TV Guide magazine is out with fabulous Fab Funke Akindele Bello, aka Jennifer, adorning the cover. She opens a secret not known even to her family. Find out the secret. NTA turns 40 this year. The challenges, the emerging trends in broadcasting, and the way forward. Weekend Dealer 2. Meet the team behind the biggest deal on NTA. Is food still the way to a man's heart? If not, what else? This edition is hot and juicy. Meet your star faces on screen. Entertainment, fashion, young minds, social media, and great personality.
This is idiosyncratic and heterodox.
Yes, Professor John Bull is on the radar. Find out what makes this program the rave of the moment on NTA Network. And for the Prof,
over and out.
TV Guide. Ask your vendors or book your copy at every NTA station nationwide. TV Guide, still your indispensable companion.
Right, to France we turn our attention now, where, of course, Emmanuel Macron was yesterday sworn as the youngest president of France at the age of 39, promising to restore France's global standing. Here is Garba Mohamed Natala with this background report.
Emmanuel Macron was inaugurated at the Élysée Palace in Paris as the country's youngest president at the age of 39. He formally took power after his predecessor, socialist François Hollande. In his inauguration speech, Macron said he will do everything that is necessary to fight terrorism and to resolve the world's migration crisis. He also listed the excesses of capitalism in the world and climate change among his future challenges. He takes over from François Hollande, whose 5-year term was plagued by high employment figures. He announced his determination to push ahead with reforms to free up France's economy and pledged to press for a more efficient, more democratic European Union. He says his main aims are to boost investment and to set up a new growth model that increases social mobility and helps the environment. Before the ceremony began, he spent nearly an hour with his predecessor, who handed him the country's nuclear codes. It was Mr. Hollande who launched the new president's political career, appointing him first as advisor and later economy minister.
All right, thank you very much there, Mohamed Natala, for that background report. Now, we've been joined in the studio by Dr. Lanre Adebayo. He's a political affairs analyst. Dr. Adebayo, a pleasure to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria.
My pleasure.
All right, let's begin first, with the question of ageism. It's Macron is the youngest president of France, 39 years old. Does that matter?
It doesn't really matter what age someone becomes a leader. What matters to me is the process that threw him up. If you look at Macron, he's gone through a process. He has had the best of education you can think of in France. He was a civil servant. He understood the system. And he's been an activist most of his life. I think within the short time of his life, he's had what you could regard as something massive in terms of exposure. For me, I think what matters really is the quality, not the quantity of age, really.
He was in his predecessor's cabinet as Minister of Economy, but he has come to say, look, he's going to reconcile, the divisive France. Can you speak to us more on that?
I think the platform he created, that you could define as moving forward for France, is a coalition platform really that brought together forces within the socialist movement as well as the radical right. I think he has tried to think far ahead, because France was extremely divided, and he provided what you could call an agreement among the forces.
Divided in terms of policies?
Divided in terms of politics. I mean, you look at the very divisive campaign of the nationalist Le Pen, and the fact that it had been on for a while, and of course, France had had series of attacks, and the a very extreme xenophobic kind of relationship between the French and their immigrant compatriots. So in a way, France has been, just like America has been, divided. So I think Macron came as a unifying force. But of course, the extent to which he will succeed will depend to a large extent on how much he could achieve in terms of controlling the parliament in France. Because being president is good, but not being able to control the parliament may be a kind of an undermining influence on whatever action plan he has for the country.
Well, they have elections, parliamentary elections next month, and it's also presenting, fairly new persons, to run for office. Is that his first gamble? And depending on the outcome, what might that spell for his presidency?
I think if you look at the policy of the party, really, it is going really to very progressive forces within France, targeting the civil society groups and the professionals and the women. So what I think he has done cleverly has been to identify the strong progressive forces in France, mobilizing them towards controlling the parliament in France. So I think he has a good chance of achieving that objective, given the momentum that his election has thrown up. And don't forget also that this young man has been thinking well ahead. If you look at his background from the time he was 12, when he chose to be a Catholic rather than just a non-conformist, like his parents were, and choosing to marry somebody very far older than him, I think you could see someone who very early in his life had been able to identify what you want to achieve and moving on to achieving them. So I think he has a good chance of winning the parliamentary elections coming up next month.
Well, that's one leg of it. The other leg, of course, we know that, yes, Marine Le Pen lost, but she also had some support. Now, for how long is Macron, as president, likely to stay on the center course, neither leftist nor rightist? If there's some quiet now in France, we won't have reports of terrorist attacks and so on and so forth. Assuming that's all of a sudden again a spot in terror attacks, what is Macron likely to do?
I would see.
Or what would be advisable for him to do?
If you look at the tendency he has brought together, there's a likelihood that he may achieve some relative peace and harmony between within the various groups forming the French. The country. But I think also that if in the event of that happening, you're likely to see a shift towards the right, even within his government. Don't forget that he's a very pragmatic politician. And I think to a large extent that he may likely to respond to such activities if they do occur. But I also think that given the fact that he had this unifying platform, you may not likely get the kind of attacks you had in the past. Those attacks really were reactions to what the immigrant community saw as kind of not getting the good treatment within the French the country.
What should Nigeria watch out for in terms of signaling? Signaling with regard to the Francophone countries that are in West Africa. What might change, and what should Nigeria watch out for in the relationship between Paris, if anything, and Francophone West Africa, so that Nigeria knows exactly, how this might impact its own economy or relationship or politics with elsewhere the West African sub-region?
Despite this centrist approach, I see Macron as more of a European-oriented leader than someone who will be identified with African issues. I think there will not be much changes within between France and its Francophone allies in West Africa. I want to see Nigeria be more pragmatic in terms of seriously identifying our interests and forcing our interests to prevail. I do not think that the French government will change its approach towards Africa or towards Nigeria.
All right. Dr. Lanre Adebayo, political affairs analyst, would like to thank you for your insights on the inauguration and, of course, the commencement of the tenure of Emmanuel Macron as president of France. Thanks for being with us this morning. All right. So it's Good Morning Nigeria. We move on down to sports. Okay.
Thanks for being there on sports this morning. We start with Premier League. Jose Mourinho has failed to win on his visit to White Hart Lane, where he hasn't won a league game since August 2005, when his Chelsea side defeated Tottenham 2-0.
Very good in the air, and so too. Not as good a strike as the one before from Wijnaldum.
Liverpool are on the brink of qualifying for the Champions League after Philippe Coutinho inspired a 4-0 defeat of West Ham, while Tottenham said a fitting farewell to White Hart Lane with a 2-1 win against Manchester United on Sunday. In contrast to Liverpool jubilation and Tottenham's celebratory send-off, there was only mystery for Hull City as they were relegated after a 4-0 thrashing at Crystal Palace. Liverpool moved back 1 point above Manchester City into third place. Meanwhile, Chelsea were crowned champions of the 2016-2017 English Premier League season after their win at Westbourne on Friday. Rivers United kicked off their opening Group A campaign of the 2017 CAF Confederation Cup with a 3-1 loss away to Club African of Tunisia. Goals from Beli Ifa, Uzama, Daragi, and an own goal condemned Rivers United to defeat. The result leaves Rivers United in top spots in their group after FUS Rabat also defeated KCCA FC 3-0 in the other Group A game. In tennis, Rafael Nadal beats Dominic Thiem 7-6, 6-4 to win his 5th Madrid Open title and move into the world's top 4.
Rafael Nadal wins a 5th title in Madrid.
That is all on sports for now. Join us for more in our subsequent news bulletins.
And we join Natala Mohammed for details from the foreign scene.
Thanks for joining us on the foreign scene. So far, in Germany, success spelled out at exit polls for Angela Merkel's Christian Democrats Party, SDU, that has unseated its rivals, the Social Democrats, SPD, in a key election. The Christian Democrats, CDU, is projected to win 34.5% of votes in North Rhine-Westphalia, the country's most popular state, compared with 30.5% for the SPD. The SPD has run the state for most of the post-war period. The vote was seen as a test for Ms. Merkel, who faces a general election in September.
North Korea is a big world problem, and it's a problem we have to finally solve.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump called for tougher sanctions against North Korea after its test fired a ballistic missile on Sunday. The missile was fired from the region of Kusong, northwest of Pyongyang, where North Korea in February successfully test-launched an intermediate-range missile. Multiple sets of UN and US sanctions against North Korea have done a little to deter it from pursuing its nuclear and missile ambitions. And thousands of Russians took to Moscow streets to protest against plans to demolish their Soviet-era homes. Opponents claim their rights are being ignored, and many fear they will not be compensated fairly by the state. That is it for now, however. More stories will come your way.
And also, that's Good Morning Nigeria for today, this new week. We thank you for joining us as usual and look forward to having you again tomorrow. I am Claire Adelabo Abdurrazak. Have a wonderful day.
All right, and remember, wherever the rest of the day takes you, it begins with us on Good Morning Nigeria. Thank you for being with us today. And as Claire said, we are back tomorrow. I'm Kingsley.